She was the most photographed woman in America, and yet the least heard. For over a decade, Melania Trump stood beside one of the most powerful men on earth, a picture of elegance, silence, and mystery. Cameras loved her, but microphones rarely caught her voice. She smiled politely, she nodded gracefully, but she almost never spoke freely. They called her the obedient First Lady. Some said she was complicit. Others said she was trapped. But Melania never corrected them. She never gave them the satisfaction of clarity. Behind the scenes, she signed non-disclosure agreements, kept her distance, and let the rumors swirl. Infidelity? She said nothing. Hidden children? She looked away. Lies? She let the silence speak louder than the headlines. For years, America debated her role. Was she a victim, a strategist, or just numb? And then, just when the world had moved on from asking, she answered. She filed for divorce. She chose the courtroom. She chose Jasmine Crockett. And the question became something far more dangerous than gossip. Why now? Why here? And why her? She didn't come from power. She came from the fight. Before Jasmine Crockett ever wore a tailored blazer or raised her voice in Congress, she stood in courtrooms where no one cared who she was. She wasn't famous, she wasn't connected. She was just a black woman defending people the system had already given up on. She fought for men with ankle monitors. She fought for women who couldn't afford bail. She fought for teenagers thrown into jail cells for crimes they didn't commit. And she never flinched, not once. Jasmine's scars weren't visible, but they ran deep. They came from battles with judges who rolled their eyes, prosecutors who smirked, and juries who heard public defender and already made up their minds. But she kept showing up, case after case, evidence, strategy, steel in her spine. Eventually, people noticed. She won the cases she wasn't supposed to. She exposed corruption they tried to hide. And when she ran for office, the people didn't just vote for her, they followed her. So when Melania Trump needed someone not just to defend her, but to expose decades of deception, she didn't pick a fixer. She picked a fighter. Because Melania didn't want a quiet exit, she wanted the truth with teeth. The courtroom didn't feel like justice. It felt like war waiting to happen. Everything inside the room was too perfect, like it was trying too hard to stay calm. The polished mahogany benches, the American flag standing motionless in the corner, the fluorescent lights humming above sterile and unblinking. Even the air felt unnatural. 68 degrees, exactly. But no one was comfortable. Court officers stood like statues. Journalists sat with pens gripped too tightly. Spectators leaned forward as if they could feel the weight of what was about to come. And at the center of it all, two women, Jasmine Crockett still, unmoved. She sat like she had concrete in her spine, one hand resting gently on the red folder, like it was a live grenade with the pin halfway out. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her silence already rattled the walls. And across from her, Melania Trump. Poised, silent, composed. She didn't fidget. She didn't glance at Trump. She didn't blink. But if you looked closely, you'd see it. The fire waiting behind her stillness. The heat rising beneath that calm surface. This wasn't fear, it was fuel. This was the kind of quiet that comes right before everything catches fire. He didn't walk in like a man on trial. He walked in like he owned the damn courthouse. Donald J. Trump entered the chamber with swagger in his step, a practiced smirk on his face, and a reputation that walked 3 feet ahead of him. Cameras clicked. Phones buzzed. Even the silence seemed to tense as he passed. He adjusted his red tie like it was a crown, nodded once, not to the judge, but to the cameras, and sat down with the calm of a man who believed the ending was already written. He's played this game before. Courtrooms don't scare him, they bore him. This was the man who'd survived bankruptcies, impeachments, criminal investigations, and walked away with a pole bump. And this, a divorce a woman scorned. He'd crushed worse headlines before breakfast. Behind him sat a legal team that looked like they were cast for television. Tailored suits, Rolex watches, cold smiles, polished, arrogant, overconfident. They whispered to each other with the assurance of men who had never lost to someone like Jasmine Crockett. They didn't see the trap. They didn't see the fire. They saw a courtroom and assumed they'd already won. Trump leaned back in his chair, legs crossed, phone in hand, breaking the silence with one tweet. Another witch hunt. Sad. He grinned as it posted. But this time, the spell wasn't on him. It was on the truth. And Jasmine was ready to break it. The moment Jasmine Crockett opened the red folder, you could feel the shift in the room. No shouting, no grandstanding, just paper, neatly organized, color-coded, dangerous. She stood slowly, walked to the center of the courtroom, and placed the folder on the table like a surgeon laying down a scalpel. "Your Honor," she began, "we start with the money." She pulled out the first document, a wire transfer, Cayman Islands, over $3.8 million. Then another shell corporations with no employees, no offices, just empty names on paper, tied directly to Donald J. Trump. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The numbers were louder than rage. Charts, bank statements, foreign transactions. Each page a knife. Each total a betrayal. Behind her, a forensic accountant from Hartman Investigations nodded silently. The firm known for uncovering fraud in Fortune 500 companies and federal corruption trials. Jasmine was no longer making allegations. She was reading a financial autopsy. And then it happened. Trump shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough. His hand tightened on the table, his jaw clenched, his spine straightened just slightly. The first crack. The man who once controlled entire narratives with a tweet had no defense against ink and math. Jasmine looked up. "We'll move next," she said, "to the accounts that were never meant to be seen." And with that, the red folder turned into a weapon. To Trump, this wasn't a reckoning. It was just another inconvenience. A headline he'd bury. A woman he'd dismiss. A courtroom he'd charm or bulldoze. "It's just a divorce," he whispered to his attorney, smirking as Jasmine laid out bank statements like crime scene photos. "She wants a payout, that's it." His lawyer nodded nervously, because even he knew this didn't feel like just anything. But Trump stayed smug. He leaned back again, checked his phone, crossed his legs. He was still playing politics. Jasmine was playing for truth. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. She just kept building. Wire transfers, LLCs, fraudulent asset declarations. Each slide she presented didn't just show dishonesty, it showed design. This wasn't carelessness, it was calculated deception. Still, Trump rolled his eyes until Jasmine said 7 words that shifted the oxygen in the room. "This isn't about marriage. It's about manipulation." Then she paused. Let it land. Let him feel the weight of it. Because Jasmine Crockett wasn't there to negotiate, she was there to expose. And now the exposure had only just begun. The red folder hit his wallet. But the blue folder, it hit his heart and everything he thought he had under control. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She simply opened the next folder, a cool, heavy blue, and the entire courtroom held its breath again. Inside were screenshots, message logs, email chains, encrypted chats from phones registered under aliases, all traced back to one man, Donald J. Trump. There were names of women he claimed not to know. There were payments marked as consulting fees, wellness grants, family outreach. But these weren't business transactions, they were hush payments. And the words, they weren't professional, they were personal, emotional, raw. No one can ever find out about us. She'll leave me if this gets out. Don't ever text me that again. Each message wasn't just a sentence, it was a crack in the mask. Each payment wasn't just a transaction, it was a betrayal with a receipt. This wasn't a man cheating, it was a man managing an empire of secrets. And now, that empire was turning against him. Jasmine paused, then added calmly, "Several of these women have agreed to testify. They no longer want to be secrets. They want to be seen." Mistresses had become informants. Loyalty had shattered. And for the first time, Trump looked afraid. She didn't just live through it. She wrote it down. All of it. In a world that tried to silence her, Melania Trump had created her own defense, one page at a time. Jasmine Crockett opened a smaller folder inside the blue one. Not filled with legal jargon, not filled with spreadsheets, but filled with something far more human. Melania's handwriting. Date-stamped notes, observations, times when he came home late, names he slipped up and mentioned, phone numbers scribbled from memory. And then came the screenshots, private messages, bank notifications, travel receipts, and finally voice recordings. Not planted, not manipulated, just real. Her voice quiet but steady, narrating moments in real time. "He's in the other room. I can hear him talking to someone, not me. He promised this was the last time. I don't believe him anymore. If anything ever happens to me, this is proof." The courtroom didn't move, not a single cough, not a breath. Because this wasn't a strategy, this was survival. Jasmine looked up and said she didn't just remember, she documented. She survived by turning pain into evidence. It wasn't evidence that broke Trump's team, it was ego. Marshall Weinstock, lead counsel for Donald J. Trump, stood up fast, his voice tight, his face red. "Your Honor, this isn't law, this is theater." And frankly, the woman presenting it lacks the courtroom experience for a case of this magnitude. He said it loud. He said it to be quoted. The courtroom stirred. Reporters looked up. Some gasped. Others smirked. A man trying to silence a woman right as she was peeling the truth wide open. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't even blink. She simply turned toward him, paused for exactly 3 seconds, and said, "I've buried better lawyers than you with evidence they never saw coming." Silence. Real silence. Even the judge stopped writing. Because it wasn't a comeback. It was a warning. And Weinstock, he sat down. Slower than he stood up. Until now, it was financial, it was digital, it was strategy. But when Jasmine Crockett reached for the green folder, the air in the room changed. No whispers, no shifting, just stillness. She opened the folder like a surgeon peeling back the final layer. Not rushed, not theatrical, deliberate. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "we now present biological evidence." The courtroom tightened. Inside the green folder were 3 documents, each marked, each verified, each devastating. The first, a DNA report. Chain of custody intact from sample to lab to court. The results indicate a 99.9% probability that Donald J. Trump is the biological father of child A. Then the second, 99.8% probability of paternity for child B. 2 children, 2 mothers, 2 secrets hidden for over 7 years. Jasmine let the silence stretch. Then she said what no one else in the room had the courage to say out loud. "These are not rumors. These are not allegations. These are children, and they have been hidden intentionally from Mrs. Trump." Trump didn't speak, but his hand, the one gripping the table, started to shake. And just like that, the truth was no longer sealed. It was screaming. No one gasped, no one screamed, because this moment didn't need noise, it needed stillness. And that's exactly what it got. The courtroom froze not from shock, but from realization. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't tabloid gossip. This was scientific, legal, verified truth. The green folder, once just another tab in Jasmine Crockett's briefcase, had become something else entirely. It was a blade, and she had just sliced through the mask. Trump didn't move, but everything around him did. His attorney shuffled his papers badly. One juror blinked hard, like they forgot how. A court officer adjusted his belt twice just to do something. And Jasmine, she stood perfectly still, like she had expected this moment, practiced it, counted every second that led to it. The green folder sat in front of her, now glowing in everyone's imagination like a bomb with no ticking sound. Trump's confidence didn't vanish in 1 second. It unraveled slowly with every breath he tried to catch and couldn't. Because in that folder wasn't just evidence. It was something he couldn't debate, something he couldn't threaten, something he couldn't bury. It was the one thing his empire had never prepared for. Truth, that didn't care who he was. It wasn't just betrayal, it was perjury. And Jasmine was ready to prove it line by line. She reached into the green folder again, this time not for DNA results, but for deposition transcripts, certified, sworn under oath. And now directly contradicted by the science. On June 14th, Mr. Trump stated under oath that he had no extramarital children. She flipped the page. On October 22nd, in deposition number 19C784, Mr. Trump denied any financial relationships with employees beyond official salary. Another page. On record, he claimed to have fully disclosed all accounts relevant to prior divorce proceedings. That was false. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't look angry. She looked certain. Your Honor, what we are dealing with is not just infidelity, not just asset concealment, but repeated, documented, intentional lies under oath across multiple jurisdictions over multiple years. She paused. This isn't a marital dispute anymore. This is a pattern. This is strategy. This is perjury. The word hit like a gavel slam. Trump's attorney leaned forward, whispering rapidly, but his eyes didn't leave the judge. And Trump, he stopped blinking. Because this wasn't just about losing a marriage. It was about exposing a legacy and watching it start to fall. There are lies, there are denials, and then there are receipts. Jasmine Crockett reached for the final tab, a slim stack of paper. No drama, just truth. These, she said, are direct messages from Mr. Trump's personal phone. She didn't wave them in the air. She didn't raise her voice. She let the words speak for themselves. Let's keep this between us. You'll get the rest of the money once the baby's born. This can't ever come out. Not now. Not while I'm still married. The words weren't blurry. They weren't out of context. They were time-stamped, verified, and connected to specific bank transactions. $150,000, $275,000, one-time deposits, under fake business names, labeled as consulting, PR retainers, nanny services, and every single one matched a message. Trump shifted in his seat again, but this time it wasn't posture, it was panic. Jasmine placed one final page on the evidence table, a wire transfer confirmation from a private LLC linked to Trump, to the bank account of Maria Santos, the mother of one of the hidden children. There was nothing left to say, because when truth is printed in black and white, it doesn't argue. It just stands there, undeniable. Every empire crumbles the same way. First, denial. Then, desperation. Trump finally leaned forward, gripping the microphone like it owed him control. His voice cracked just slightly as he spoke. These messages, they're fake. Probably AI or doctored screenshots. This is all fabricated. Lies. He looked at the judge, then the reporters, then directly at Jasmine. Wrong move. Jasmine didn't blink, didn't move, didn't even look surprised. She just tilted her head and calmly asked, "Are you accusing your own telecom provider of forgery?" Silence. Real silence. You could hear someone exhale in the gallery, too loud, too human. Jasmine continued, now with surgical precision. Because these records were subpoenaed directly from your phone company, time-stamped, metadata verified, not by me, but by forensic experts under federal chain of custody law. Trump didn't speak. He didn't blink. Because if he said yes, he'd be accusing AT&T or Verizon of conspiracy. If he said no, he'd just admitted the messages were real. Checkmate. On the record, broadcast live. For years, he owned the camera. Now it betrayed him, and everyone saw. Trump wiped his forehead, once, twice. His hand shook. The cameras didn't cut away. They zoomed in. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't even smile, because the room was doing it for her. Reporters typed like lightning. Court sketch artists redrew his face. No longer stern, no longer smug, but pale, sweating, cornered. On Twitter, hashtag selective transparency exploded. Clips of Jasmine's question, "Are you accusing your own telecom provider of forgery?" were viewed 2 million times in 15 minutes. Facebook comment sections turned. News alerts changed tone. Even Fox News called it a stunning unraveling. And inside the courtroom, Trump's team leaned away from him. They weren't defending him. They were distancing themselves. Because they knew this wasn't just about losing a case. It was the death of the myth. The myth that he couldn't be touched. That he could lie faster than truth could catch him. That power was its own kind of protection. But in this courtroom, truth had the microphone. And the legend was leaking sweat. The room didn't exhale. Not yet. Not until the judge finally leaned forward. He was an old man, measured, deliberate. But his voice had weight. He removed his glasses slowly and said one sentence that echoed like thunder. "This case will be studied for decades." The gallery went still. Even the press stopped typing. He continued, voice low but unwavering. "We've seen wealth used to intimidate. We've seen platforms weaponized to distort the truth. But today, we saw the law do what it was meant to do. Protect truth over power." He paused, looked directly at Trump. Full settlement. Transfer of funds custody rights and public record sealed only in favor of the aggrieved party, Congresswoman Melania Trump. Based not on celebrity, not on wealth, but on undeniable evidence and courage under fire. Gasps broke through the silence. But Jasmine Crockett, she just nodded once, as if she already knew. What Jasmine Crockett did in that courtroom wasn't just a win. It was a rewrite of how justice is fought and how truth is proven. Legal textbooks will mention her. Law students will quote her. Mothers will tell their daughters her name not as a politician, but as a protector. She didn't weaponize wealth. She weaponized facts. Cold clinical digital evidence, DNA, digital forensics, and dignity, all side by side, all speaking louder than money ever could. From now on, no courtroom can dismiss encrypted chats, deleted metadata, or private audio diaries as circumstantial. Because Jasmine proved, in the right hands, digital truth is a sword. Judges across the country quietly updated their standards that night, and one thing was clear: justice didn't just win, it evolved. Because Jasmine Crockett walked in and rewrote the rules. She waited until the cameras stopped flashing, until the crowd stopped gasping, until even Jasmine had stepped back into the shadow, and then Melania rose. No makeup smear, no trembling hands, just stillness. And that impossible grace she had worn like armor for years finally unstrapped. She didn't walk toward Trump. She didn't even look back at him. She just stood at the microphone, the one meant for victory speeches, concessions, or chaos. But she didn't deliver any of that. She gave only a sentence. One. Sharp as glass, soft as regret, strong as survival. I believed in him longer than I should have. But now I believe in myself. And then Melania turned not to exit, but to enter a new chapter. And for the first time in years, she wasn't following anyone. She was leading. Within 24 hours, the world changed. Not dramatically, but undeniably. The hashtag selective transparency trended in over 70 countries. Not because it was catchy, but because people saw themselves in it. How many truths have we swallowed just because they were filtered through someone else's algorithm? News anchors dropped their sarcasm. Editorial boards that once mocked Melania's silence now published headlines like, "From First Lady to First Witness. Crockett's courtroom where evidence beat ego. Not just a divorce, a digital reckoning." The tone shifted from gossip to justice. Universities requested transcripts. Podcasts played Jasmine's one-liners like national anthems. And in cafes, courtrooms, and group chats around the globe, people weren't whispering. They were asking, if she could stand up to him, what have I been afraid of? It was never just about Melania. That became clear the moment the courtroom fell silent. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was a social diagnosis. How many women had lived her silence? How many endured because they were told endurance was grace? The hashtags had faded, but the reflection lingered. Melania was no longer a wife. She was a symbol of every woman who had swallowed betrayal, smiled through bruises, signed NDAs instead of divorce papers, and learned to walk with dignity on broken ground. And Jasmine? She wasn't just the attorney of record. She was a new blueprint. Not loud, not vengeful, but deliberate, data-driven, devastatingly precise. Crockett proved that in an era of doubt, evidence doesn't just speak louder, it protects. She didn't roar. She revealed. And revelation was enough. The courtroom was empty now. The noise faded. The verdict made history. But one question refused to go away. It echoed in living rooms, schools, churches, in marriage counselors' offices, in boardrooms and bedrooms. If DNA exposed this much, what else is still hidden in silence? How many truths were sealed with shame? How many secrets traded for survival? Melania's case wasn't just about power or betrayal. It was about silence and the cost of keeping it. Jasmine didn't just crack a legal code, she broke a cultural spell. And now the question sits quietly on every phone screen, every dinner table, every whisper, where someone wants to speak but hasn't found the courage yet. When silence protects power, truth becomes an act of courage. Melania's story isn't just about betrayal or legal battles, it's about the quiet strength to finally speak. And Jasmine Crockett reminds us that real advocacy isn't about shouting, it's about showing up with evidence, integrity, and fire. Whether you're facing injustice at work, at home, or inside your own heart, this story is your reminder. You are allowed to speak. You are allowed to fight. You are allowed to stop surviving and start living. If this story moved you even just a little, don't let it end here. Subscribe now to join a growing community that believes in truth, justice, and the power of one voice to change everything. Your click might be small, but your voice is not. Nếu câu chuyện này chạm đến bạn dù chỉ một chút, đừng để nó dừng lại ở đây. Hãy nhấn đăng ký kênh để cùng chúng tôi xây dựng cộng đồng những người tin vào công lý, sự thật và sức mạnh của một tiếng nói. Một cú nhấp chuột nhỏ có thể là khởi đầu của một thay đổi lớn.